to be lucky, and we'll have some success this year with our so-called good government legislation. The League is happy that most of the key priorities we had this year survived crossover. So we met most of them. We met that procedural deadline, but we have a long way to go.
Right, just a halfway mark, and the other side, the other chambers have to hear those bells.
Right.
Thank you, Janet. Carmel, tell us a little bit about Common Cause and what your interest is at the Capitol.
Sure. My interest is being a rabble rouser, and I get paid for it, so, dream job. I'm really happy to see a lot of familiar faces out there, but for those of you who I've never met before or have never heard of Common Cause Hawaii is a local chapter of the nationwide nonpartisan Common Cause. So we're one of 36 nonpartisan chapters. What we like to say is that we're process-oriented. So we focus really on our mission is threefold, so we focus on three things: encouraging civic participation in government, holding government accountable to the public interest, and protecting our political process. And we believe that by addressing all three of those branches, we then allow for the social and economic policies to move out of the gridlock and work through the legislative system. So with that, our areas of interest, when we say good government, we think of a responsive government. So our areas of interest within that realm are ethics, transparency and access, campaign finance reform, voting elections, and a strong independent media.
Okay, thank you. And then Senator, can I just call you Miley? Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Perhaps tell everybody about your history at the Capitol. You went to the House first, now in the Senate, the committees that you're on, and your priorities.
Let's see, I first got elected to the House back in 2003, and then it was around 2010, 2011 that I moved over to the Senate to take Colleen Hanabusa's place when she moved to Congress. And it's been a fantastic journey. I never thought I'd see the day that, I'd see myself sitting in the seat, and being an elected official at all. I also work as an attorney in legal services, Legal Aid Society. The committees I'm on at the moment, I'm Chair of Hawaiian Affairs, Vice Chair of Judiciary and Labor Committee, also a member of the Water, Land, and Agriculture Committee, and member of the Government Operations Committees. So very, very fortunate to be on committees of high interest to me. This session, just looking at some of the bills, there's definitely some bills that I think would be interested to this panel. I did introduce an automatic voter registration bill, worked with Janet on that one, and with Carmel, and I'm happy to see that that version, I think, is moving through a House bill, and I truly believe that voter turnout is a huge problem for my district, definitely, and the state of Hawaii. I remember seeing a headline a while back that I think Hawaii has the lowest voter turnout in the nation. I don't know if that's still the case. And what I always tell my constituents, who have 80% that do not vote in my district, is that it makes a huge difference. I really believe it does, because we have such limited resources, and so many districts all competing for the same pot of money for our schools and for our parks and for you name it. And to me, it makes logical sense that when you have limited resources, all of us here are trying to get reelected. When it comes down to departments and the really high levels making decisions where the money's going to go, you're going to want to give it to your voters. So, and I think the same would apply on a statewide level too. If the federal government's looking at what states should they fund, and they're going to look at Hawaii, the lowest voter turnout, guess what? We're not going to get too much from the feds either. And so I think this is a great topic to be discussing, and there's some really exciting legislation to really make it easier for people to vote. And so I really hope that many of these bills make it with the support of these two great organizations.
Thank you. By the way, our goal is to get through these topics and save enough time, hopefully 15 minutes, so that all of you can chime in with some questions. Just quickly, why do we have the lowest voter turnout? Do you have any clue as to why that is?
Well, there are lots of pundits trying to explain this, but we really don't have a social science explanation for it. You hear lots of talk about apathy. Certainly, most people in Hawaii work very hard, and so if you have a full-time job and a family to take care of, and you're trying to drive around and get to work and take care of your family, it doesn't leave much extra time. So League has been, and Common Cause, and Senator Shimabukuro, we've been working on convenience type reforms. And maybe this is a good point to stop and throw a little color on the voter turnout question, which remains a problem. We all agree about this. The voter turnout equation has two parts. The first part is about voter registration. And here the numbers are really shocking. A March estimate is that there are nearly 400,000 people in Hawaii who are eligible to vote who haven't registered. That's 36% of the eligible population. So the League thinks we're not going to make any progress on the voter turnout until we address part one of this voter equation. We're not going to make significant progress until we can improve voter registration. That doesn't mean we think we will ignore part two of the equation, which is about getting people who are already registered to, getting them to vote. Automatic registration, voter registration, which Senator Shimabukuro mentioned, is something that all three of us have been promoting. This is an effort to let people register to vote when they renew their driver's license or they renew their civil ID card. It's something that would cost virtually nothing. There is no appropriation required in the bills, I don't think.
Good. That's great.
Yeah.
No, I may not have looked at the most recent version, and please correct me if I'm wrong. The voter registration for your car, you're renewing it, or your voter ID, I thought that bill was dead. Is that still alive technically that you can?
There's at least
There
20.
were several bills introduced.
Terrific.
Right.
Because there's another one where you can register for an ID and then you don't have to disclose all of your social security
Right.
numbers,
Right.
just the last 4 digits.
That's a slightly different effort. This is about, you go down to take out your driver's license, and there will be a question on the driver's license application asking you if you want to register to vote. You can decline, it's possible to opt out, but if you want to register, you can do it that way. And all the data of the affidavit for registering to vote will be included in your driver's license application. It gets electronically transferred by the driving and civil ID officials over to the election officials. It makes perfect sense, right? This would indeed be a much more convenient way for people to register to vote. Careful review of the bills that are still alive have been done by the Attorney General and the Office of Elections to make sure that these are compliant with the National Voter Registration Act. And so we think we're good to go. This is not an effort that started this year. And I make a point about no appropriation being required, because this is the case with many of the good government bills. It's a false choice to say, oh, you can't have automatic voter registration because we have to pay for air conditioning in the schools. Many of our bills, ethics bills in particular, require no appropriation whatsoever. So our agenda doesn't jeopardize a balanced budget, nor does it jeopardize funding for critical public services. I just want to make that point.
Well, that's great. And Miley was just pointing out on her computer, it's a House bill, it's alive, it's passed, Senate Judiciary, now going to Ways and Means, which is the final hurdle, having already passed one chamber. So that is alive. This is
HB 401.
Okay,
Yeah,
terrific.
Representative Carl Rhodes, excellent bill.
Little background, again, these are the experts, and I asked them to correct me on anything. And but online voter registration is now available. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. That was no small accomplishment. I mean, think about it. We do everything online. Now you can actually register. You can't vote online. Not yet.
Not yet.
That's another hurdle, but you can register. And starting in 2018, same-day registration. That means, I think that is, you can actually walk in to the primary or the general election precinct and register that very day and vote. Is that correct?
Right. For 2016, it's limited to the absentee polling sites, so early walk-in voting sites, generally at the
Honolulu City Hall.
Yeah, the different city halls. And then 2018 is the second fold of that program, which is that you can register to vote on election day at any of the existing polling places.
I don't know why it took so long to get that one passed. It didn't seem like a no-brainer to me. I want to vote. I haven't registered. I'm inspired. And then you show up and they go, no, we can't register. So that's very encouraging. Another accomplishment, all male voting, not male first.
Take two, let's try that again.
We would not.
Voting by mail, I'll try it that way. I believe we're going to roll this out in Kauai, starting in 2018. And then 2020, the other counties, and I hope I understand this correctly, when we say all male voting, does that mean we close the precincts, that we handle all our voting by mail?
That's a good question. There would still be places called voter service centers where people who did not want to vote by mail or had some question about how to vote could go to the voter service centers. But it is true that the number of polling places, physical polling places, would be greatly reduced. And if you didn't do that, you wouldn't save any money and modernize the way we vote. This voting by mail is really an extension of how people are already voting. In the 2014 general election, the majority of people who voted in the election did it by absentee ballot. So this is, in most ways, is not a huge change. We support this change because, for two reasons. It simplifies operations and it saves money. Usually when you make a process improvement like this, it reduces the complexity of the operation and leads to fewer mistakes like lost ballots or polling places not opening on time, things like that. The Office of Elections should have one voting operation to run, not a hybrid of polling places, absentee voting, et cetera, et
And
cetera.
part of the impetus for that bill, in part, was it cost money for the elections office to staff people at the precincts.
Correct.
Let me just ask you this question. I've got a buddy, he's a Republican. Yes, I have Republican. And he says, this idea of absentee balloting, I think it is your duty. I like walking in there on election day. I like standing in line. I like going behind the curtain. And my feeling is you can still do that, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But if you're like me and you're busy and working election day, normally you can actually just fill it out. So a question from Claire T on Twitter: how can government, that's you, justify spending money on programs and services for the neediest if civic participation is often about the loudest and most elite voices? Because that's the way that they're listening to some people but not others, is what you're saying. Softball for you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a tough question in that I know that many do feel disenfranchised from this process, and then they feel as if, unless you're a lobbyist, someone who's paid big money, you can't really get much done at the Capitol. But I would actually point to some good examples. Last session, we had the Carlton Ching nomination to chair DLNR, and I was just, it was amazing to see the outpour from the public that came from all corners of the state, both in person and email testimony and faxes, calls, and it was extremely effective, that these non-paid, everyday citizens were able to make their voices heard, and we were able to find an alternate candidate. And, Carlton Ching, is a great man, and I'm very happy that he has, now he's working on, I think, the rail project or some other area, which is great.
Or is it UH?
Yeah.
Might be.
Oh, maybe UH. Sorry,
Yeah,
UH West Oahu, I think. Yeah, somewhere in West Oahu. And so, people may feel that way, but your voices can get heard.
That was putting a land developer on the board that takes care of the land. We have Suzanne Case from the Nature Conservancy was chosen. Carmel, I just want to make sure you didn't want to chime in on that question. Loud voices, because you have a loud voice.
Well, I used to be cheerleader. Well, just from personal experience, I started off in public policy and advocacy, being one of those angry advocates with signs down in the rotunda, always yelling, but never really communicating with legislators in partnership. So I remember when my predecessor, our former executive director, Nikki Love Kingman, mentored me. We were down at the Capitol and we actually worked together to pass online voter registration, and representatives at the time, like Representative Shimabukuro, now Senator, and other folks took the time to listen to myself and other people when we were still college students. So I think there's this misperception that you need to be elite, you need to be a professional in the legal services to do this. It's just, I think, a matter of making it a priority and making sure you speak to them like people. speak to legislators like people and actually talk through the policy changes you want to see happening.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not always going to work, but I think that's a step forward, and I think we need to move past this mentality of us versus them and work together to find solutions that we typically can agree on.
Okay, thanks. Anything else on voter turnout, or can we move on to campaign finance reform? Speaking of loud voices and money, is that all right with you guys?
I would just like to mention one thing. I don't know if the legislature is conceptualizing things this way, but a lot of very good legislation that would position us for voting by mail is going on and has already been going on. Like in 2013, Act 235 was passed that prohibits an employer, a union, or a candidate from handling someone else's ballot. That's a good idea, right?
The Roman Chola bill, I believe.
This year, there's a bill to provide a means to replace absentee ballots. There's another bill which has to do with whether you can share your ballot on Facebook or take a selfie of it and share your ballot.
You cannot do that,
Not right
correct?
now. Not right now. Not right now. Anyway, the more of these groundbreaking or groundwork kind of bills that we can get passed, the better shape we'll be in for voting by mail. And for that matter, I don't know why these bills couldn't be passed with, as is, with effective upon passage, because then they'd help us with the 2016 absentee voting, but whatever.
Anything else on voting?
Well, so anecdotally, what some of our members and supporters have told us is they're not inspired to vote because the pool of candidates is so small. So I just wanted to make note that Rep. Lopresti introduced a ranked choice voting bill that I think would alternate the way we look at elections. Right now, it's a single majority, plurality votes. If people, they choose one candidate out of, let's say, a slate of 5, and the person with the most votes wins, regardless of if that actually represents everyone. So with ranked choice voting, each person can rank on the ballot 1, 2, 3 in terms of the candidate they prefer. And so this has been proven successful in different counties across the nation. And what I personally like about it is that it produces a more, I think, civil dialogue around campaigning. So instead of trying to cut down the other people on the list, they try to make themselves sound better and appeal to others with a positive way, because they want to be the number 2 person, because they might not, if they're newcomer, they might not get number 1, that's for the incumbent. But if they rank number 2, likely they could move forward and win an election. Yeah.
Well, there's also instant runoff voting, or
It's same thing, yeah.
The top 2 would be able to go forward.
Yeah.
Fundraising, I have this habit of posting when lawmakers hold fundraisers during session. You better read Civil D. I think it's a problem that you're listening to lawmakers, you're listening to lobbyists who say, pass this bill or don't pass this bill. By the way, here's a contribution. To me, it seems like a conflict of interest. Do it when session is over. So I had a guy come up this year, a very powerful person in this building, I will not name names. He says, I held my fundraiser the day before session and you put that on Civil B. And he said, I intentionally held it the day before. And I said, it's the same thing. You're going to open the same day, but I just can't figure out why we have fundraisers during session. There has been legislation to stop that, goes nowhere. On the bright side, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, we do have legislation where super PACs locally have to disclose the donors, people that gave them money in advertising. Is that correct? That is now law. And one other requiring corporations to provide their shareholders when they give contributions, political contributions to people. So that's some progress made, but there are a couple other things that have already died. Increasing fines for campaign spending violations. At least the last I checked, it was dead. There is one for more money for the Campaign Spending Commission to do its job, and another one that I believe is dead, an administrative fine if they file late with their forms and willfully forget about it. But bring us up to speed on campaign finance reform at the legislature. Who would like to go first?
In terms of campaign finance reform, our priorities, and I would like to say the lead as well, is making sure there's adequate funding for a sustainable campaign spending commission. So if you're not familiar with them, the Campaign Spending Commission is the state agency that's tasked to be a watchdog to enforce the campaign regulations, campaign finance regulations. Right now, their general operating expenses is being pulled out of the Hawaii Election Trust Fund, which was initially created to support a public funding program. So what's happening is the money in the election campaign trust fund is dwindling, and we're looking at possibly not having a campaign spending commission within the next 2 years, should this continue. So we have two bills that would remove the election campaign fund remove the campaign spending commission from the election campaign fund and move the general operating expenses back to the general fund. That's how it used to be. And that's how we would prefer it to be, because taking money out of a trust fund is just not okay. So with that said, one bill continues to preserve the original intention, SB 2438. Its House companion, HB 2156, has been severely altered. Surprise.
Who did that? Who did that stuff?
It happened in the House Finance Committee. And so,
Sylvia Luke?
so the bill now allows for candidates to give their own campaign contributions to other candidates, which is currently prohibited. It would allow for campaign funds to be used for civic membership. And remind me what the third one is.
Well, the third one is a butte. The third one would permit office holders from using their campaign funds for memberships in community and community organizations and protocol gifts. It would raise the current limit, double it, for such use of campaign funds.
So this is when you donate to a candidate because you like them, and then they take your money and they give it to another candidate that you have no knowledge of, or they use the money for community groups or
Right.
charitable purposes and so forth.
Right.
And that's Sylvia Luke, Chair of the Finance Committee.
Well, and I just want to follow up on something Carmel said, because as far as we're concerned, it's egregious. The bill that we're talking about now, House Bill 2156, asserts that there are excess funds in the Hawaii Election Campaign Fund. And there's no basis for saying this. So we worry that in an election year, the legislature is going to effectively destroy the partial public funding program that was established by the people to make it possible to use a different way of running your election, not be so dependent on big money interests. We're just not sure where this idea of excess funding came from, and we don't think there's any way to estimate what is excess in that fund.
That amendment goes even further to not only say there is excess money in the election campaign fund, but that the Director of Finance can move that money from the election campaign fund to the general fund. So essentially depleting, or giving the chance to deplete, the trust fund meant for public funding. So if we want to move from the current obsolete partial public funding system to a fully comprehensive public funding system, we need to ensure that there is some adequate funding in the election campaign fund.
Okay, so Senator, why do your colleagues do this sort of thing? Softball for you.
Oh, geez. Well, sorry if I say, well, I just noticed that it's being heard tomorrow, March 18, 10 a.m. by our JDL committee, room 016, at least House Bill 2156 is.
The one that Carmel was referencing.
I guess, yeah. So FYI for the public out there, if you want to chime in tomorrow, 10 a.m., room 016, JDL committee.
Bring a sweater.
Yeah, yeah.
To the basement.
The partial public funding program is a jewel. The league wants people who are interested in running for office or incumbents to use this fund. We want you to use the fund. And we also hope that as we're all struggling with our income tax returns, we will take the opportunity to use the checkoff. There's a checkoff on your income tax return. You can designate up to $3 of your taxes to go to this election fund.
It does not alter your income tax return. What it does is allot $3 or $6 if you're filing jointly of the general fund money to go into the election campaign fund.
So keep this alive. It's a star out there in the world of dark money.
Is it fair to say the search for more general funds will always be with us, and lawmakers are constantly, there's only so much revenue that comes in, you have the unfunded liabilities that always have to be paid, and a search for funds goes on, every day fund and so forth.
Oh, yes, yes, so, I mean, that's what I would suspect is behind this, is there, I mean, there's, like I said, there's so much more requests than we can possibly fund every single year. We have to say no to so many people, and so I think it's, an attempt to try to see if there are any excesses out there, and if there's any way that we can try to bring those funds into the general funds so that we can then fund all the charitable requests we get. That's
Grants and aid and
yes,
CIP back home, yeah.
Thousands and thousands of grants and aid that we're getting. So it's very difficult. So I would guess that's what's behind it, but I was not on those other committees. I'm not sure what the rationale was, but I'm sure there was some reason why.
By the way, I want to acknowledge the Senator Ronald Ruderman from Puna is in the audience with me. Senator, we're over halfway mark here. We're wondering whether they're going to cut us off cold at 1 o'clock. I hope not too cold, and I do want to get to your questions. But I wonder if I just might mention, because I know that you also worked with the senator on some bills that did make it, and I'm shifting a little quickly here, but talking about term limits. There was a bill to have term limits for both, do you want to come on and join us?
That is his bill.
It's your bill,
yes.
And there's a microphone.
See what happens when you come to a meeting.
But, and I'll let you, well, in a nutshell, it would have capped at 12 years, if I have correctly, both the House and Senate. And then you could take a break, you would be forced to take a break, but then you could run again later. Is that right? But that bill died, and you've also been pushing. Well, I also want to bring up a referendum and recall an initiative. We can talk about that later. But the term limit bill, I wonder if I could just introduce Russell.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the term limit bill, Senator Laura Thielen and myself, and I believe Senator Shimomukura co-signed on this one too. It would have instituted term limits in Hawaii, which we have for our governor, lieutenant governor, mayors, council members, boards, and commissions. We have it for virtually everyone who legally can have term limits, except for us state legislators. And the one that we proposed, and we were just trying to get the discussion started, we're flexible on what it ought to look like, would have allowed 12 years in the House and 12 years in the Senate in terms of consecutive. And then you can take a couple years off and run again if you want. We believe this deserves a discussion because many states have it, and the result of it is a very refreshing new faces in the legislature, and it results in a legislature that's more made up of people who are active in their community and their civil life that come and take a turn in the legislature versus the career politicians that dominate Hawaii politics. And we felt that along with initiative, these are some of the things that a lot of other states do that would re-inject a little enthusiasm and a little democracy into our system.
Okay, and of course the counter argument is you're getting rid of experienced people. But the counter argument is they're there too long, they've become entrenched, they're not really working for you, they're working for re-election all the time. Would you have support, well, you were signing on to that particular bill, you think that would be a good thing?
Yes, I think it's definitely something that is worthy of discussion, and I'm glad that Senator Ruderman took the lead to introduce it, because it's true, that it's very difficult to mount a campaign against a sitting legislator, and and that's why you see that in Hawaii overwhelmingly the incumbents win, in most all races, and so it makes it very difficult for new people to enter, and I think it is important to get new blood in here, new ideas, and people that are zealous, and how you are when you first get elected. So, yeah, I think it was a good idea, and hopefully it'll come back again.
And John, if I may add,
sure.
The bills that we introduced would simply have put this question on the ballot for voters to decide if they want it or not. It's
A constitutional question, right? Exactly. So we wouldn't even have the opportunity to weigh in on that. And we're going to get to initiative in a second. Bob Martin on Facebook asked, does anyone know on whose behalf Speaker Suki introduced HB 2156, the bill? Janet, Carmel, it could be a little misleading because often you won't find out who that was, and it's mysterious, and bills switch back and forth, but I don't remember who the original author was. Maybe you can call it up and see if you can find it, HB 156. Let me talk about initiative briefly. Initiative exists at the county level. That's where voters, if they get enough signatures, can petition the government to put a question before on the ballot. And we've seen it on the Big Island, we've seen it on Maui, we've seen it on Kauai. Some mixed successes. I'm thinking of the GMO bill on Maui, which went to court. But we do not have this at the state level. And of course, many other states do have that. It's been introduced again and again, usually by Sam Sloan, a Republican senator, but there's been some effort on a few Democrats as well. Why are we resistant to having people introduce ideas for the rest of us to vote on? What do you think the holdup is there? I might start with League of Women Voters, initiative.
Initiative. I'm not sure of all the reasons we're reluctant to do this. I think in other states, California comes to mind, we've seen, should we say, a clogged ballot with constant repetitive attempts to change things. And I think there's probably a certain amount of voter fatigue over certain initiative measures.
Carmel, initiative?
My understanding is that there isn't as much traction as there could be because of logistical reasons. How do you account for the different types of responses that initiative could elicit?
Well, both of these ideas came from a conference of legislators that Senator Thielen and myself attended, where we learned that among Western states, most have had both initiative and term limits. In many cases, term limits came about through initiative. And yes, there's been some examples where initiative has resulted in consequences that we good government advocates might not like. But what we did was review the other states and suggested a series of safeguards, having where you can't be a paid signature gatherer. There's a fairly high number of signatures required. It cannot be used to manage our budget. And the legislature can overturn it in future years. So there's a lot of safeguards to guard against some of the bad examples of what's happened with initiative. Myself, I mean, there are some fears of what might happen with initiative, but I think the consequences of not having any direct voter input into our state government are worse than the risks of having voter input.
Okay, speaking of elections, a bill to elect the Attorney General is still alive, is that correct?
No.
Good idea, bad idea? The Attorney General opposes it, by the way. Jim.
Chime in. I think it's a bad idea, and I think for a lot of the same reason, that the bill to elect judges was luckily deferred.
That's correct.
I think anytime you politicize those kinds of positions, it's very dangerous. Because that's one danger of voter initiative. I mean, when you put something on a ballot, of course, I would think the natural response from people is going to be, yeah, let the people decide. If you're give us the power to elect our AG, give us the power to elect our judges. It's giving the people, which sounds good, but for a lot of these positions, you want someone who's shielded from having to worry about getting reelected. For a lot of obvious reasons. I mean, if the AG has to worry about a campaign fundraiser and who's going to be supporting his reelection, that's going to definitely impact what kind of cases he takes on. Is he going to challenge this developer that might be doing something against the state's interest when that developer might be someone that's going to give him a donation? I mean, you don't want our AG to be in a position to have to worry about stuff like that.
The lawyer for the state of Hawaii having to raise money to run for office.
Yeah.
It's a head scratcher. Janet, Carmel, anything you want to chime in there?
Not good. Really, another important aspect, another important reason not to have an election of the Attorney General is we rely on the Attorney General to be the frontline person upholding our state constitution, regardless. I mean, that's important. That's probably one of their most important duties.
I want to ask one more question, and then I'm going to turn it over to questions that you might have. This goes to all of us. Ethics. Les Kondo didn't even bother introducing a package, I believe, this session. It's because his bills never really go anywhere. He is not well liked. He's the executive director of the State Ethics Commission. He's very much someone who he follows the state code of ethics and he enforces it. That upsets people. The most egregious example, of course, is teachers and having trips that are paid for, and they chaperone and so forth. And legislation is now being pushed forward to essentially carve out an exemption to the ethics law so that these trips can continue. And Les is very much upset about that. But why is it seem that our legislature is so resistant to ethics, they are in fact exempt from the ethics code, are they not? Do I have that right?
Yeah. Most provisions, yes.
Yeah, most provisions of so the people that wrote the law exempted themselves? Right, do I have that right?
Yeah, you do.
All right, why is that, Senator? I know you didn't write it, Russell.
Well, no one told me I could have had a lot more fun. I myself believe ethics should be strictly enforced in the legislature and all aspects of government. I don't have any problem with the ethics director being an active ethics director, and I wish there was a lot more of that.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, I mean, there's quite a bit of ethics that we are subject to.
Absolutely.
We can't accept, certain gifts that are over $25. I think then it becomes a problem. So I think there is definitely a certain amount of ethics that we are, we must be subject to. Our filings, our financial disclosure is a public document. We can't, I know we can't use our position to give anyone an unfair advantage, so I can't favor some person other than, so there are definitely things that we have to watch, our back. So on that and make sure we aren't, stepping over the line.
And I should clarify, I think what I know is the sunshine law. They're exempt from the sunshine law,
yeah.
not the ethics law.
Oh,
So
okay.
Yeah, I caught my own error, not bad.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yes.
My boss is looking at me going, Chad. All right, at this point, we got about 15 minutes left. I'd like to just check with you folks in the audience. If you have a question, raise your hand. Yes.
First, I'd like to welcome Corey Lum and.
Oh, that's our photographer, Corey Lum over here. You know what? Let's get this gentleman, sir, would you mind coming up and we can just put this mic on you? Would that be okay? If Russell, if you mind just turning around? Thank you.
Sure. So first, I'd like to put in a plug for the public access room.
Yay.
So we answer very, complicated questions and simple questions, and we have handouts and computers, and you can do your testimony there. So really take advantage of that. And we do see individuals with good ideas have them turn into legislation. So that does happen. So don't forget that. And my question is what the chances are of us getting voter-owned elections. How would we politically increase our chances?
Well, don't defund the election campaign fund. And also making sure we have a viable campaign spending commission to help distribute the money.
Those would be the first steps, the first logical steps, but it would take additional appropriations to the partial public funding program, and that hasn't happened in a long, long time.
But
Yeah.
politically, how would we do that? Senators.
It's I don't know, one thing is, Mike, I mean, I think it's a tough thing because, if you're gonna have to fund candidates, that means you're taking funds away from, again, all these grants and aid. I've got, districts, school districts begging for air conditioning and begging for playground equipment for the kids. And I think it's just tough because to say, okay, we're gonna take this money away and not give it to people that want to run for office. It's a hard, I think that's what it boils. That's a great idea, and I would love to see that happen, but realistically, I don't think we can afford it.
I would love to see it happen also on the Big Island. We did have a public funding option for 2 of the 3 election cycles that we were scheduled to have. It dramatically changed the makeup of our county council, and it was a very refreshing change. As far as the cost, to me, the cost is a drop in the bucket to our state budget, and the cost of the system that we have, which is driven by corporate contributions, although it's not as visible, cost us 100 to 1,000 times more in the publicly funded elections. The way it would happen would be more people like yourselves supporting a bill when we introduce. I've introduced such a bill a couple of years already, and of course it dies right away, but no one's clamoring for it. So I think it takes some public outcry requesting it.
More questions, please, and then maybe we'll use this one over there if that mic is on. Courtney, if you wouldn't mind checking, there's a green light there.
Yeah.
Come on up.
At least you have to conference.
Ann, is that you?
That's me.
Ann, are you Irish?
And just for the record, Patrick was not a nice guy, and he was a Roman.
Okay.
This is Irish Day. It's not that simple. Yeah, I have some questions, but I'll just narrow it down to one. So, Family Leave Act.
I believe I see the influence of money in politics here and some ignorance. You know, so I think we have some, on our side of the fence, some work to do with, you know, persuading and educating people. The unions and SHRM and the chamber are against it. You know, because they don't understand employee funded means you pay 50 cents a week and you have family leave, or we get nothing. You know, so I hope it passes, it's moving. You know, I'm hearing that that's doubtful. So my question is, you know, I've been at numerous hearings, as you all know, and I have noticed a pattern with SHRM and the chamber, is they routinely oppose any bill that might benefit workers or women in the workplace. And, you know, so they've opposed the Family Leave Act, even though how can you oppose the Family Leave Act when it's employee funded 100%? That doesn't make sense to me. And so my question is, why are our legislators listening to these people? You know, their chamber in other states, California, to mention a few, have supported numerous bills of benefit, family leave being one of them. You know, so I am baffled. You know, first of all, I'm baffled at the chamber who's, you know, losing their credibility minute by minute when they oppose a bill like this. And secondly, I'm baffled that our legislators seem to give them equal weight with the community.
Okay, thank you, Ann. And by the way, we're going to have to be out of here at 1 because democracy will not wait. Russell, you're a businessman on the Big Island. You're an employer of people. Your thoughts on Ann's question?
Well, I'm also baffled by the Chamber of Commerce's position, and not just any chamber, statewide chamber, but local ones too. I have over 200 employees, and I strongly supported the minimum wage increase. For example, I thought we should have done much more. And I feel that, and I actually don't join the Chamber of Commerce because they advocate for positions that I cannot agree with. And I think it's bad business to not take care of your employees. And I cannot understand how foolhardy it is for someone to think we should make employees struggle more and somehow our businesses get better. So I agree with you completely. And I think the Chamber of Commerce should enter the 21st century and be a part of our society.
I'll let Sherry know.
You know, I don't know if, I think part of the concern might be too, I mean, that, well, Russell's got a big business, 200 employees. You know, I know others that have tiny ones, you know, and I know that I think there's exemptions for certain if you're under
Yeah, but this
20
is,
or
again,
something.
remember, employee funded.
Yeah.
So,
You know, yeah, so I don't know, I think there is a sense out there among the smaller businesses that, you know, they feel like there's just so much put on them already with, you know, unemployment, workers' comp and all these things. And then to require this kind of thing that I guess they're concerned about abuse, you know, if
yeah, so all this means is they add into their deduction 50 cents into the FICA. This is not rocket science.
And I do see that the Senate SB 2961 family leave is moving, but it's got 2 more committees to go on the House. So I see what you mean, that you know, it's kind of iffy with all its opposition as well. I mean, I personally support it, you know, but I know that I hear a lot of flack often from the business community saying, you guys, you know, you got to be another thing you're going to make us do. It is very hard to make it in Hawaii as a small business. So, you know, I think that'd be my guess, is that it's just that kind of resistance and that they're trying to protect.
Right, but we're keeping at it. But again,
good, thank you.
It seems like, let's think about this. Small
Thanks, Sam.
business.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to
Thank
give
you.
everybody a final comment, and we're going to keep it at 30 seconds or so. Just a final parting word for our audience. Carmel, down the end, please.
We can make it, please attend tomorrow's 10 a.m. judiciary labor hearing and strongly oppose HB 2156 so that we can preserve our campaign spending commission and Hawaii election campaign fund.
That was less than 30 seconds. Well said.
Wow.
Toastmasters.
Jen?
Oh, hear about what Carmel has just said, and oh, by the way, let's get that voting by mail bill done. It's something that we've been talking about for 20 years. In terms of cost effectiveness, it's a no-brainer. Let's just do it.
Okay, Senator Russell Ruderman.
Well, I didn't mean to crash this party. I really came.
That was fine.
You added to it.
But I appreciate all the concern for these subjects. Taking up 5 seconds of my time.
Now we can pinch you, Chad.
But thank you all for your concern, and I think that we need to make your voices louder so that some of these things we talk about don't get ignored the way they do. And I appreciate Civil Beat for shining some light in it.
Yeah.
I'd say it's a spotlight. And Senator Miley Shimabukuro, the last word is to you.
Great. I wanted to highlight a bill that we just heard this morning in JDL, House Bill 1654. And this, I thought, sounded like a really good bill. It's talking about permanent absentee voters and saying that you can have alternate addresses. And one of the key parts is it says, allows a voter to receive an absentee ballot by electronic transmission if voter requires such a ballot within 5 days of an election, or a voter would otherwise not be able to return their properly issued ballot by the close of polls. And I'm wondering if this has to do with the whole situation in Puna, where there was that natural disaster.
Oh, in the storm.
That horrible
Yeah.
situation, and people were trying to vote for the Congress race. And I don't know if that's what this.
They couldn't get to the precincts
They couldn't
because
get there.
trees were down and power
And it was
lines.
horrendous, and it was, and I felt so bad for Senator Ruderman's district. So I don't know if this, is that what HB 1654, and we did pass it out, and it had a lot of support. It's an Office of Elections package bill. It moves on next to Ways and Means. And so it sounds like a really good thing, and it's really, I'm guessing that, I don't know if you folks know, is it trying to help that kind of natural disaster
It's trying
situation?
to help that kind of natural disaster situation. It's
Good.
trying to answer unanswered questions about absentee voting. If you're out of town for
Yeah.
one cycle, can you have your ballot directed somewhere else?
Oh, okay, good.
It's improving the absentee voting.
Oh, we'll put it on our radar at Civil Beat.
House Bill 1654.
We've got it. Thank you, Carmel Lim from Common Cause, Janet Mason from League of Women Voters, Senators Miley Shimabukuro and Senator Russell Widerman, and I want to thank Civil Beat. I'm Chad Blair. It's been great. We are going to have to get the heck out of here. So if you have questions for anybody, let's head out because there's a lot of space outside on the lanai, the interior. Thank you. A round of applause, everybody. Take care. Aloha.